appreciate it, and good morning from my side as well. So we'll talk a little bit about the next 20 minutes, the need for observability and how I believe this has changed over the last couple of years. Now, let's see if I can get my slides moving here. There we go. Now, the need or the fact that each and every one of your businesses undergoes a digital transformation is something we're not going to spend time on. You all know that, you all live that. You've heard throughout this morning how profound the effect of the digital transformation is and has been to each and every one of us. What I want to talk more about is what underpins the digital transformation, what's happening on a technology side. And one thing that I've started seeing over the last couple of years, I think it started slightly before COVID really put the back burner on the digital transformation, is that we live in a world of multi-clouds. As much as individual hyperscalers will try to lift and shift your whole data centers, you're always going to be in a situation where you have multiple hyperscalers. You'll have on-prem components. You'll use technologies like Kubernetes as a service or self-hosted, as a commercial offering like OpenShift, or as something that you run based on the open source stack. You'll have what's sometimes called legacy technologies like the mainframe still being around and still being a vital part of your overall delivery chain. So this multi-cloud is not an intermediary state. It's not something that goes away, but it is the new normal. And the easier, the quicker you start accepting that, the better off you'll be. So with this new stack, with this new environment, there's a couple of challenges that are popping up when you think about how do you really monitor, manage, observe this overall stack. And by stack, I mean the infrastructure, the applications, but also the end users, because all three together are what really makes a difference compared to your, well, competitors. The first one is everything's dynamic, containerized, small bits and pieces that constantly move around, that get scaled up, scaled down, new releases get introduced left, right, front, and center. New technologies very often get introduced without any upfront, hey, we're going to do this is what's going to happen. No, boom, we've decided to deploy a new service. There you are. You'll need to keep up. Your teams will need to keep up. The second part is that there's this increasing volume of data. Now, with every stack, with every component that you add, there's another source of monitoring observability data. Logs, metrics, traces, your hyperscaler gives you information. Each of your hyperscalers will give you data points in different areas. And as I said before, those data points, due to the nature of our application stacks today, are going to change more and more frequently. The third one, or the third challenge, is the frequency of change. Now just think back, I know 5 years ago, we all probably lived in a world where applications, releases, had proper time, proper planning, and every couple of weeks a new feature release would be coming out, followed by maybe some bug fixes. But things were a lot slower paced than they are nowadays. Most customers I work with at least release something to production daily. And by daily, I don't mean that every single day everything changes, but every single day, or actually quite a lot of times much more frequently, individual bits and pieces, individual services will change. And each of those changes has the potential of bringing down your whole site. The fourth area is the importance of applications. I mean, just think about how many applications could have a disruptive impact on your journey here this morning. How many different bits and pieces, and I'm not just talking about the technology in the room here, but all the different types of applications that we depend in, day out. And what the expectations are that some of the global companies are setting these days. Now, if you're in the retail space, I can guarantee you each and every single customer will compare the experience to Amazon. As snappy, as stable, as the offering as wide. So we are all living in a world where it's more important than ever to deliver the perfect custom experience each and every single time. And to have visibility into that aspect is something that's not only crucial, but it's also increasingly difficult. The fifth and last point is one that most of the organizations I talk to are in the mode of saying, you know what, we need to make sure we keep up with what we have. Resources are limited. I'm not going to double my team just because I'm now responsible for more. No, I'm actually asked to reduce stuff, to do more, to take on more capabilities. So we live in a world where people are looking a lot more closely to how they're spending their IT budgets. And this monitoring, this observability is something where humans still are the best, the most efficient way to keep up. Now, I believe that with this chain of, I would say, approaches, and I've just tried to list a couple of them here. Sorry, they're not coming out too well on the slide here. But it's basically the journey from the early adoption into cloud, where we had single applications that were based on cloud technologies. We started to refactor applications, cloud native development started, microservices became a thing, and we really hit the point where it's no longer enough to just continue as is. We've hit what I would say is a wall, where your current approaches of point solutions, trying to somehow have a human piece together, the overall picture is no longer going to work. So what are your options? Well, option number one is you could just continue as is. But I strongly believe you wouldn't be sitting in the room here if you were interested in just keeping the status quo and just continuing business as you've ever done. So that leaves us, I would say, two main options when I talk to customers. One is a do-it-yourself approach. After all, every engineer you ask will tell you there's loads of open source technologies that they can make fit and they can do something in that area for you, or you can leverage a platform. Now let's take a look at option number one first, which is the do-it-yourself approach. When you are thinking about the do-it-yourself approach in the area of observability, there is 6 different areas you need to think of. First off, how do you gather the data? The traces, the logs, the metrics across different platforms, across different technologies, and how much effort will you spend on keeping up with changes in your application? How are you going to store this data? Now, I know big data is going to be the one keyword that everyone's going to scream out now and say, big data platforms are here to solve everything. Many big data platforms are really bad at storing disjoint elements of data. Log files, basically unstructured text, metrics, numbers with a timestamp, traces, end-user flows, and then trying to all of them link them together, because in isolation, those pieces of data don't make a lot of sense. You need to look at them holistically to really get this 360-degree view of your data. You need to figure out how to organize it. So what are those relationships? What are baselines? What are problem patterns? Is this good or is this bad? Because again, a human won't be able to say for every single metric what's the expected behavior. If you do all this, number 4 is you'll get a lot of noise. You'll get a lot of false positive alerts. You'll get a lot of duplication where the same problem shows itself in different manners, in different aspects. So you'll figure out, what am I going to do for noise suppression? How do I make sure that my team's not suddenly drowning in alerts and they don't know left from right anymore and they don't know what to focus on? You need to visualize it, dashboards, reporting, which in this whole picture I think is the part that is most solved. There is decent solutions out there for visualizations, whether there's commercial offerings or whether that is something based on open source, thinking, for example, about Grafana. Good visualization, but what do you visualize if you don't have the data points? And 6th, I purposely put on here because very often I hear, yeah, but we've done this for this application and it works out well and it's so much easier than you're trying to tell us here. Yeah, doing it for one app is easy. Doing it for 1,000 apps, that's where it's getting hard. And it's not 1,000 times harder, it's exponentially harder to scale such a system to really your whole infrastructure, your whole environment. Not just a handful of users in a test systems, but millions of users that are using your app, your website, that are interacting with your IT systems. Now, if we look at the 3rd option, which is leveraging a platform like Dynatrace, the data gathering is the part where you're not going to spend any time, because that is fully automated, and it's automated by purpose, and we could probably spend 20 minutes just talking about why I believe that automation is such a crucial capability, But it basically comes down to, if your application's ever changing and is very complex, humans won't be able to keep up. You need an automated approach that captures data and makes sure you're always up to date. A built-in repository for storing all this data with context, and that's really the key difference. It's the context piece. Knowing what happened on the server when the log file showed an error, which apps ran, which errors were shown, which end users were interacting. Making sure that this organization happens automatically, okay, and that we have the noise suppression built in as part of the platform. Not as something that is done after the thought, because noise suppression, for it to really work, it needs to not only understand the data, but it also needs to know the context. If I know context, if I have the link between all those disjointed pieces of information, I suddenly can tell you that what you're looking at is just the same problem from 5 different angles. I'm not going to alert you with 5 different things. I'm going to say there's one problem, and it shows in the log files, it shows in the metrics, and oh, by the way, there's 1,000 end users that are currently affected. Now you start working on the issue, and I'm even going to show you where the root cause is. Because if I order those things top to bottom, guess what? The bottom's the root cause of your issue. Now, of course, visualization and reporting is part of this, because data is not worth anything if nobody can access it. And then last but not least, scalability by design. Whether you use the platform on-premise or whether you use the SaaS service, currently the largest customers I work with are monitoring around 150,000 servers on a single platform. Now, I'm not saying that you need to be close to that area, but I think that should give you a level of comfort that with a platform like Dynatrace, there's enough headroom for you to grow. You're not living at the edge. You're not like literally percentage-wise almost at where the system can't scale anymore. There's a lot of headroom for you to continue growing. Now, let's spend the last couple of minutes to just quickly look at how does this overall platform look like. And I'm going to abuse a picture that I know many of you have seen. It's probably at least 10 years old by this time, probably even older. But it still reflects very well the difference between a do-it-yourself solution where you take either commercial point solution or open source capabilities and try to build up something, or you take something that was built from the ground up. And I think that is a fundamental thing that I want to make sure each and every one with you leaves here is look for a platform. Don't look for individual point solution. Don't fall for a vendor saying, yeah, I have 5 products and they're all integrated and they're all going to do the thing together. 5 products integrated is only slightly better than buying 5 individual products and integrating them yourself. You really want to look for a platform that looks at data from all different angles. And it's not just making you jump from one place to the other depending on what you see and depending on where you are. Now, the platform that Dynatrace has is, on the top you see some of the main use cases that we cover listed out, whether that's observability more from an infrastructure perspective, whether that is application observability, where the application is basically the center or the core piece, or whether that is different areas of security, whether that is protection, whether that is security analytics. Thinking about the Log4Shell vulnerability that I know most of you still remember, and how painful it was to figuring out what exposure do we have? What exposure do the third-party apps that we run actually have? And having a system that literally took us about 15 or 16 minutes after the vulnerability popped up to have a full, complete list of where this vulnerability was active in our own environments, which application it was available, and I think a customer took 16 or 17 minutes in total to get the same picture. Digital experience, I mentioned before, important aspect, keep track and keep visibility of what your end users are doing. Never ever stop at the data center's edge. It's great that your applications are all running. It's great if response times are low. Little known secret, nothing is faster than an error. An error will have always great response time, sub-second response time, never breaches any thresholds. Well, if your end users are no longer getting to your site, if they no longer can do what they actually came to do, whatever your business use case might be, this is not specific to retail or to finance, this could be government. This could be the 𝐄𝐝𝐢𝐨𝐧 that I used yesterday evening at the airport. If they're not working, I'm going to be impacted very directly, and I'm not going to care a single bit if the data center is up and running fine or not. I'm going to care that I'm currently stuck not being able to get through the airport to my hotel to get some sleep. Now, underneath the platform, there are different components that I'm not going to go through one by one, but there is a data storage layer, obviously, that is meant and built for those type of technologies. There is an automation engine that allows you to trigger activity based on that, because for most people, when they start thinking about observability, what they start realizing is, why can't we automate some of those? Not just the data capturing part, but if I can find the problem, if I can tell you what the root cause of the problem is, why can't we just automate the first steps of a runbook? I know the first step in a runbook very often is restart the damn thing. Why can't we automate this? Why do I have to wait for my operations team to pick it up and to deliver that? Now, Dynatrace, our platform, goes beyond just observability, which is defined as just logs, metrics, and traces. There is, I would say, from the list below, the most important thing, topology. Understanding how things are linked, understanding what's working with each other. That's really the secret sauce that makes this platform different. That makes the AI, the machine learning, all the other things we do on top possible. It all wouldn't work without the data at the bottom being linked and having those linkages. Now, of course, there is integration with all the various platforms. If you run on a hyperscaler's infrastructure, it's just a click to integrate with their data source. Again, it's all about augmenting the picture. It's all about the 360-degree view, where we want to make sure that there's not a blind spot. You're never going to get to a point where you say, well, we know there's a problem, but we really don't know where it is. We just now know 15 areas where not to look. The Dynatrace platform, and really that's the thing that is important, is a platform. There's one UI, there's one product. There is, as you can see on top, there's different capabilities that you can use or cannot use, depending on what your use cases or what your areas of focus are, but fundamentally, it's a single platform. And it's a single platform that will deliver value across the different types of stakeholders. This is not just for your production, for your IT teams. This is for everyone from developers being able to innovate faster, higher quality, to an operations team that can operate more efficiently, more quickly, all the way to a business user. Because why should metrics, why should monitoring always be on a technical level? Why can't it be on a how many transactions are running through the system, how much revenue are we making, and if that revenue number drops, that's the cause for an alert. That's something I want to have my operations team being triggered or being looked at. Now, my final slide, who is Dynatrace? We are a public company. We are based around the globe. Majority of our engineers, which is currently more than 1,000, sits within Europe. And we do have a local office here in Dubai, so we have about a year ago started to intensify, I would say, our presence here in the region as well, because we see it as one of the areas where there's still a lot of potential in the area of digitalization, of observability, and we're here to help and support you all with those endeavors. Thank you very much for listening.